Welcome again to another session of Sydney AI and Data Science, formerly known as Data Science Sydney. You're in the premises of the Institute of Actuaries, and the actuaries are very happy to support this meetup group. Actuaries work fairly closely with a lot of data scientists and a lot of the, I suppose, overlapping practices in some way. The Institute of Actuaries also has a data science practice committee, which focuses on all the new and evolving environment, and particularly around ethics around data science, and also educating a lot of our members in techniques. Just trying to think, is there anything else I need to mention? I can't remember. Anyway, I'd like to welcome Eugene to the podium and to give his introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening, Bill. And yes, I'd also like to thank the Institute for their ongoing support, and indeed Bill for convincing me all those months ago to restart what was then Data Science Sydney and is now Sydney AI and Data Science. Just out of interest, is there anyone here who didn't get a name badge? Hands up. You don't have to get the name badge, just hands up, just so we get a better idea of numbers. Everyone got a name badge? That's good. Okay, fantastic. I should also say welcome to everyone, or welcome to many old members who've been here for many years, since before COVID times, since the very beginning in some cases. And a special welcome to one of you who's come all the way from Victoria, who you are, and one of you who is actually expecting. Welcome. So yeah, quite a crowd, and a very interesting and important topic. It's all well and good to keep having meetups about AI, LLMs, generative AI, because it's all flavor of the month. But I think it's important to return to the topics that matter, the things that actually deliver important, provable value. And of course, today's topic, MLOps, is one of those. So it's very good to return to something that's actually valuable and serious, which is not to say that AI isn't also valuable, isn't also serious, but you'll accept that this is a topic for really for people in the know. This is a topic for those who've worked with machine learning in a real world capacity, and understand that if you can't bring it into production scalably, reliably, efficiently, well, you haven't got the value out of it. So let me tell you about today's speaker. Grant Case is the Regional Vice President for Sales Engineering for Data IQ in the Asia Pacific and Japan region. I hope I got the name.
Yeah, got it.
He holds an MBA from Indiana University with concentrations in finance, decision support modeling, and marketing, and has served as an adjunct lecturer at Columbia University in the Master in Applied Analytics program, where he has taught multiple courses. Grant's expertise spans AI, machine learning, data in organizations, executive management, and driving innovation across the Asia-Pacific Japan region. And without further ado, over to you, Grant.
All right, thank you, Eugene, and thank you, Actuaries, for the invitation today. I do appreciate it. As someone who's been pricing out meeting locations, this isn't cheap, guys, so we do very much appreciate the efforts for you all to come out and to put this on. As Eugene said, my name is Grant Case. I am the Regional Vice President for Sales Engineering for Data IQ. You will notice I will tend to walk around during this conversation. As it was stated, I've been a lecturer at Columbia University in the United States, so I do a little bit of the Socratic method. I'll ask some questions of the audience. I do have goodies, so we do have some swag. So if you do get an answer right, raise your hand. I'm happy to give you a little bit of swag with that. So what is tonight's presentation about? Unlocking the power of MLOps. First question, who has heard of MLOps? Yeah, most of the folks, yes. So as Eugene said, I would say up until March 2023, before the enthusiasm for generative AI came on, this was probably the hottest topic out there. So if anybody knows Gartner, they talk about kind of where the cycle of where things are. MLOps is definitely in the, hey, we're starting to understand these are concepts that are important to us as an organization. So therefore, we're going to continue and we need to make this work. So tonight, what I'm going to do is we're going to have a little pop quiz because again, I've been a lecturer. I like to actually ask a few questions here and there. Again, got swag, no worries. We're going to define a little bit about MLOps because I think it is important for you as an individual who may be managing a team. Perhaps you're an individual contributor, maybe you're a data scientist. This is important concepts to understand. So we'll then say, why do we need MLOps and why MLOps and do I need it? So that's actually a very interesting question because the obvious refrain, of course, Grant, why wouldn't I want MLOps? Well, there's some really good reasons. This is not easy. In much the same way, we'll talk about how I can design a model. Getting that into production, as Eugene was talking to me a little bit earlier, there's a little bit of difference in that, right? So let's say, example, I need MLOps. What should I be considering as part of that process? And then we'll do a little wrap up. Again, ask questions. I'm happy to interact with the audience. So if you have something you want to talk about, sure, knock yourself out and then we'll wrap up. Then I'll turn over the floor to you. Sound good, everybody? All right, awesome. So our pop quiz. What general elements do I need in order to replicate a model's performance? I need 3 things in general to replicate a model's performance. And unfortunately, the morph came across, so you might have picked it up on behind. But what are the 3 things? For anybody want to call it out? Raise your hand. Yes, sir.
Numerical stability.
Numerical stability, absolutely. That's part of the process. So that would come into what I would consider more of the data aspects of. So we got lots of shirts up here, so feel free to come up and get yourself a shirt, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So data is one of the elements that we need in order to make MLOps work. Why is that important? Why should we care? If I am creating a model in an environment today, I need to understand that that model is going to work in much the same way if I put it into the production. If I am building a model off of data that's plus 6 months from ago, is that indicative of the way the model is working today? So feel free to get up. Feel free to grab a shirt. So thanks, Fred. Fred is with our marketing team. Fred is trying to get rid of shirts. So we brought shirts tonight, folks. So yeah, so that's good. That's good. Okay, next, we got 2 others. What do we need? Yes,
you need code that runs the same way, like the same process.
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, we need code.
Photos everywhere.
Oh.
Need to answer a question.
All right, well, it just is, yes, we'll get there. Yeah. Always in the demonstration, things go wrong. So code, absolutely. We need code. We need the models that we created in that environment that we built, and that individual data. We need our data pre-processing scripts. So those data pipelines that we're building that model, as part of that. So we need our training evaluation routines. All of that good code that we used to develop that model, it's got to get into the production environment. If it doesn't matter. And then, as I will say, I think somebody said it over here. Feel free to grab get back here. This is just killing me tonight.
Environment.
So yes, you get sorry, your name?
Ed.
Ed, you got to pick. You get Ed a t-shirt. So the environment. So this is important. If I have code, so the code I use, the models I built, the data scripts that I created in order to build that model, if I have the environment, meaning I have the libraries, I have all of the specific versions of The different pandas or all of that, if I've got the data processing, if I have any CLI tools, if I have the Docker file that I use to build all of this, and then I have the data, I can effectively take what's been built and move it into a production environment, right? 3 things, that's all you need.
You look at excess.
Pretty easy, right? It's easy. Absolutely not, it's not easy. If this was easy, there'd be a lot more people doing it. Now, and I can guarantee you right now, most of this stuff is not getting done too much. So let's jump into it. What is MLOps? So a very good friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago, his name's Mark Travail. He wrote a book here at Dataiku, in effect, MLOps on MLOps. And his definition is as such. MLOps is the standardization, streamlining, and machine learning lifecycle management. That is effectively the simplest, most succinct way I can define what MLOps is today. So we're going to take this apart. First off, machine learning. Machine learning is MLOps. It's about machine learning models. This is not DevOps. So who has worked in DevOps? You know, maybe you're doing, yep, a couple of folks. Very similar, where we take application code and we move it into the production environment. It's a little bit different when we talk about MLOps. Why? Well, we got dependencies just like we have MLOps or in DevOps, right? But that data, that sneaky data, those models that are not, you know, they can change. That's where we get different. So it's also not model ops. Models are not machine learning. Anybody who use with rule-based systems, anybody who's doing ontologies or doing something around fraud detection, right? Those are rule-based systems. Those are models. Absolutely. But that's not MLOps. And then we have data ops. That's responsible for that cleaning of production data systems. You know, we got any data engineers in the house? You, sir, have a lot of people hitting you up on LinkedIn, don't you? Yeah. So if you want a job right now, you put yourself as a data engineer, you know, SQL, Python, you'll beat them off with a stick because they'll be coming for you, all of the recruiters. Because again, this is incredibly important stuff, right? Making sure I can get data from source systems into my production environments. But guess what? That's still not MLOps, but we take a little bit from it too. Next, standardization is the process of implementing and developing technical standards based on the consensus of different parties. We are here to maximize compatibility, interoperability. Get back here. Compatibility, interoperability, safety, repeatability, and quality. Why is that important? Why should we care? Because standardization ensures that when I take something from one environment and move it to the next, that it will remain the same. Gives me consistent, repeatable values. This comes back to earlier. Do I have numerics? You know, are things fairly normal, right? Streamlining. Simpler is better. That's the easiest way to put this. If I have developed a very bespoke process, and Eugene will talk to you, you can go talk to Eugene and talks about design. Who's a data scientist, AI engineer, machine learning engineer? Yep. So of course, all of your code is clean. It's repeatable right there. There's no Jupyter notebooks that, you know, where you're doing things on one cell and moving to another, right?
Everything in C#.
Oh, okay. A man of class, character. Yeah. So, but this is part of the process, right? We have to streamline. We have to keep things consistent so that it becomes simple and repeatable. We want it predictable. Predictable. Simplicity is our friend because, quite frankly, our models get crazy, get nuts. You should see some. And then lifecycle management. This is the key difference. How do we take a process that might be that complex and bespoke and create a scalable process? This becomes most important aspect. When I talk to clients across the region and here in Australia, the first 1 to 2 models it takes to get into production, 6 months to a year is fairly consistent. Now, if I can't make this process repeatable and get it faster, guess what? I'm not going to have a job, because that first 2 models, the first 3 models are very, that's intense, man. But guess what happens if I can't get it going? If I can't get out, 6, 10, 15, 20 more after that, guess what? We're going to have problems, right? Because one of my former managers, he said, what is the prize for winning the sausage eating contest? More sausage. So once you start building those models, once you get those analytics projects running, guess what? Eugene, they get really excited, right? They're getting excited for those new models. They want more, getting value. So I love this quote from Kaz Soto, Google. Creating an ML model is just the starting point. The design of a model, that creation of the model, is just the starting point. The real world issues: I need to build a data pipeline. I need to create automated validation of that model. I need version control. I need a scalable serving infrastructure in order to make that. And I need some monitoring and alerting to make this work. That is one of the most effective set of discussion points that I know today on what you need in order to make machine learning operations work. It's ML plus ops. But it's not constant, and nor is it single-threaded. I'll talk, coming back to my data scientists over here. Do you work alone?
Mostly. Yeah.
Mostly, but you go talk to people, right?
Yeah.
Who do you talk to?
Business people.
Business people, yeah. You talk to the IT people?
Oh, I'm the IT guy.
You're the IT guy, you're the model guy, you do everything.
The application architect, but I do
Yeah.
as well.
It's like, do you sweep the floors too?
That's right.
Take the trash out? Yeah, absolutely. But that's the key. Like, you become in the middle of all of this when you're becoming a machine, when you're doing models, right? Because why are you in the middle? Why are you in the middle?
You know everything.
You know everything.
How it works.
Exactly. You have an understanding of the concept of the business because you're building a model that is trying to replicate what you do as a business, right? So you need a bunch of people around you. You need data engineers. Our friend that's making, beating them off with the stick from LinkedIn in terms of the recruiters. You've got to have yourself, you've got subject matter experts you're working with. You're working with the DevOps team. You're working with, business people, line of business. This is not single-threaded. It's a whole collaborative team effort as part of this. And it's not constant. It's very sporadic in how things work. Model inputs are always changing. Model outcomes are always changing. Governance. Anybody working, in a governance aspect? Yes. Important, right? Yeah, model governance. You wouldn't have a job. You did. Absolutely. It's important. People are paying. The environments are changing, the organizations are changing, and people are changing. Here's an interesting factoid, right? So roughly the median time for a data executive to be in seat right now is between 24 and 30 months. So that's the median time before they're gone. Data scientists is a little faster. So chances are the people you're talking to today in your side of your organizations, 2 years from now, good chance they won't be there. So you better be able to have a model and a process that is consistently and repeatable. So why MLOps, and do I need it? It's a valid question. Do I need it? So let's take your normal today. I've got a couple of models. My team says, well, I'm going to pick on you, Lolo, for a moment. So Lolo has a couple of models today. Tomorrow, his team wants to build a bunch of models. And then in the near future, want hundreds of models, right? Fantastic. Models are great. Well, first model I build, first models I'm going to build. What are those models going to have? They're going to be the most valuable. Why? Why would the models that I first build are going to be the most valuable? Yes.
Pick the high value things first.
Yes. Sorry, Lewis. Get Lewis a t-shirt, right? Thank you, Lewis. You're not going to build a model on something that's not going to create value. So over time, I will move all of my I'll do the ones that create the most value, but as I create more and more models, the incremental value associated with each new model I create is going to go down. So at some point, I'm going to have a lot of profitability per model, right? This is diminishing returns, back to economics for a moment, right? You know, diminishing returns, every new model I'm creating is profitable. At some point, I'm going to cross this threshold. And that's not a good threshold to cross. Why? Because that means every new model that I create is more expensive. Inefficiencies, missed opportunities, risks, lower values. So guess what? If I don't find a way to decrease this cost curve, if I can't drive the cost down of every new model I create, I'm essentially going to get to the point where I can't create any new models because it will be too expensive to do so. It will not be valuable. You, as an organization, when you're talking to folks, should have this concept in mind. AI projects, ML projects, in effect, I'm selling you the future. I'm telling you the future. Now, the question is, can you actually take that future? So let's say yes, Grant, I am fantastic, 100% behind you. I am looking for MLOps. I think I want to drive the costs down. I want to have 1,000+ models in production today, but guess what? I don't know what's going on and what's happening. Well, this is a typical, and you've seen, if you've done anything in MLOps or you've read anything around MLOps, this probably looks familiar. It's a little infinity curve. It goes all the way around. We start out with business qualification because, again, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Alistair. So Alistair went to his business folks. We figured out what that model was. We created that model. Great. We did some discovery because we should do discovery. We then did some data prep because God knows nobody actually has any good data at this point in time, unless they're with, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir? Yash. Unless they're with Yash. Yash's got great data. You don't have, no, you should go talk to Alistair. You go talk to Yash. He's going to get you some good data. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to then develop that model. You're going to create the readiness. Is this model ready to go into production, right? We're going to then sign off because we're going to go to our governance individual. They're going to say, yes, this is good. Then we're going to deploy that model and go into production. Happy, happy, happy. What is the reality of the situation that I see today? We're decent up here. And Eugene, I'll pick on Eugene as we were talking about a little bit earlier. Eugene is a data scientist and, hey, we're good at qualifying that data. We get that data discovery, the preparation. It's that model development, and then we go, what's next, right? This is the tough stuff. This is where, if I talk to data scientists in general, they don't want to do any work. This is where they're good. I'm cool. I work with an individual, his name's Dan Kinney, runs commercial data science for Janssen Pharmaceuticals. So Dan's got, probably a couple hundred data scientists in the world, all around the world that report into him. And he likes to talk, data scientists want one crank. They want to crank it one time and then they're done, right? I feel good, did it work, great, but I need to move on. Got to do something different. But this is important because we got to get all the way throughout this process. Model sign off. Most of the time I see model sign off is only sitting in financial services. And typically it's a set of email trails. Not exactly helpful if you're trying to figure out what happened. Anybody work in a regulated industry? Yep. Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. Somebody comes back to you 2 years afterwards, you put that model through, guess what? They want to know who signed off, what, when, where, why, right? Then we get that deployment. How do we get that model into production? Hey, it worked great on my local laptop. It had a set of libraries. Maybe I built a Conda environment associated with it. It's all good. Throw it out. It's all working. Yeah, I was working on a Mac. It's going on to an Ubuntu LT, 2204 with a setup with the SE Linux enabled. Good chance it's going to work. Not really. Model consumption. Can my actual people actually make use of it? Monitoring. Great stories. So many good stories. A lot of them even sitting in insurance. Models created years ago, sitting out there. No. You monitoring it? You know how well it's performing versus? Not really. We would like to know though. Most models that are produced, they go out in that production environment, off you go. Continuous improvement, good luck. A lot of times, is somebody looking at it? Are we upgrading it? We're making sure it's working. I say all of this because most of this you see out here, this is the meat and potatoes of MLOps. This is the meat and potatoes. This is the stuff that's most important. This is why we pay the run teams and the DevOps teams so much money, because this is where value gets created. We create initial value here, but if we want repeatable value, it comes out here, and we got to work on it. So, do you need MLOps? It's a good question. All of I just showed you, that's a dev team, it's a DevOps team running 24/7, making sure everything's critical. You're monitoring your data, you're monitoring your models. This is not cheap. It's absolutely not cheap. It is difficult, and your data scientist will not want to do it. You might find a few that do. Yeah, no, not for you, right? You didn't get into this racket to do that. That's dev work. That's ops work. I'm not in server business. Guess what? That's why we are. So do you need to do that? First and foremost, if I need MLOps, first I'm going to look at what is my model complexity and my model count. Model complexity and model count. If I got 1,000 models, guess what? If I don't have any MLOps, yeah, that didn't happen in the first place. You never got there. You basically, you're a flaming pile on the side of the road because your car blew up. Complexity, it's important because if the models are complex, somebody has to be able to understand them and make them work. Model risk. Who here is in financial services? Couple in financial services. And we got a biotech. Biotech, yep. Healthcare. I probably want the models that I create to tell me if I need to go into the doctor's office to be, valid and ensure their efficacy. Yeah. So if I have model risk, if my risk is higher, then I'm going to need MLOps because I have to be able to ensure its repeatability, accuracy, all of that good business, all that good fun stuff. And then rate of change. Rate of change is interesting. We're going to talk about rate of change because rate of change can mean many things. Just as what do you think the rate of change is? Just anybody blurt out, raise your hand. Yeah, rate of change.
Probably a model's parameters changing.
Parameters changing, yep. What else?
Changing.
Yep.
Model drift.
Model drift, yep. Data drift, yep.
Business drift.
Business drift, yeah. Did my business change? Yep, these are all important, right? And depending upon how fast this is going, if I am going, 1,000 kilometers an hour, I sure as heck better make sure that I'm pointed in the right direction. So you said, Grant, that makes sense. I have complex models. I'm in a and I am in a governed, a governed industry. I think I need some MLOps. Help me. What should I be considering? What should I be doing? So with critical gaps, the more you scale, the worse it gets. Let's say you have 10 models today. 2 years, you want to be at 100 models. I'm going to tell you right now, my anecdotal, and this is just from me talking to data scientists and organizations for the last 5 years here in Australia, 5 years before this in the United States, roughly 10 to 30 models is the breaking point. You get up past 30 models and you don't have an MLOps process in place or one that's pretty decent, this is where the wheels fall off, right? And typically it's closer to 10 to 15. So if you're getting across 2 to 3 models, guess what? This is a lot of effort. You know what? Plan for the future, but you don't necessarily need to be, going all the way full tilt right now. But if you're approaching into this zone, you need to be, and you don't have this defined, it's time to start thinking real hard about this, because your organization is going to start pushing you harder and harder to get out more and more models because, we like recruitment. We want to do stuff in HR. We want to understand, when our employees are going to leave us. But yes, we also are interested in when our customers might churn. And yes, we want to do, market basket analysis because we want to recommend what is the next best product, right? On and on and on and on. And if you do not have a process by this, guess what? Things are not going to go well. So this is my breaking point. Model, go back. So my key takeaway for all of this, again, model count and complexity is the best indicator in the need for MLOps. Of all of the ones I'll show you and we'll talk about, this is absolutely the one that is the best indicator. If you're up in 10 plus models now, and you don't have these sort of environments prepared and ready, now it's the time to go. Now it's time to start thinking about it real hard as part of that. So as it grows in importance, so do the risks they generate. Anybody know what this is? This risk matrix, anybody done anything like this? Bill, yes. Yeah. Grant, I know what that is. That's what the risk manager shows me, right? Well, this is probability and impact of what a model, model execution looks like, right? And they're all, probability, that's your best guess. That's where we'd talk to the business team. What are all the potential risks? Operational failure. If a model falls down, does it kill your business? If it's only running once a quarter or once every 6 months because we're doing a segmentation, no, that's not a problem. Reputational. If you're doing this model, are you going to run into problems? This is probably, this is my key. If it came out that it was something bad happened, how would it look on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald? Right? It's the best way. Anybody ever pushes you? What would this look like if it got out? That will shut a lot of people up. I've done it before. Regulatory, very easy. Governance, important. Is this good governance? Are we ensuring that this model is actually being created, is being put out? Is it against policy? Is it against our policy to build a model based upon certain characteristics? Could be. Am I doing a credit model? Could I use protected information in that model? No, it's important. Audit, human capital, and bias. These are all risks. What is the risk associated with that? What is the probability of it hitting, and what is the impact? Most of these I see are really kind of sit in this area, maybe a few back here. Very few show up here in the top right corner. Why does anybody think this doesn't really happen? I don't see models up there. Anybody? Euler?
Well, in biotech, we had the Class D detection, so we have to proven that we said didn't have a disease, they have a disease.
Yes, exactly. So you're way up here, right? But for the most part, organizations will tend not to pursue models up into this area. You guys are a different story because this is where your business lies, right? So that's important. For the good news, but for the most part, most of you, it becomes judgment calls. Judgment calls here. So this is really critical to ascertain whether you need MLOps. If your models don't have much of a chance of impact and they're not going to impact much, and you don't have maybe but 2 or 3, you got time. Don't worry about it. You know, make plans, but you got bigger fish to fry, more likely than not. So here's my fun. So we started talking about this earlier. Rate of change is one of the biggest keys for MLOps. And I was telling Maddie a little bit earlier in Tiger when we were talking, there's only one set of individuals who build models today that are in effect trying to show that the model works, but not trying to change in the environment in which it works. Anybody know? Anybody? I know you guys know, but anybody know what profession creates a model but doesn't necessarily create that model to change the business or change the environment? Statistician. Go further.
Actuaries.
Close, but actuaries are building models to deal with risk and whether they should pay out.
Econometrics.
Economists, exactly. Yeah, economists build models, but they're not trying to change the world, right? We build models to change the world. We try to understand and observe what's happening, and the idea that I need to change what's going to happen. But there are many things that are going on with the model itself that can impact that. The first is feature drift. So these are my data drift folks. Feature drift, the attributes that go into the model itself. Do they change over time? More likely than not, yes. So my average FICO score went up. I've got more people coming in from Western Australia than I do from New South Wales. I was an average age of 32, now it's 37 that's coming in my through the door population. These are all changes in the features. Doesn't necessarily mean it changes my model, but it could. And part of MLOps is understanding when things might change. Do I accept that change and let it go? Or do I need to go back to the drawing board and change things up? Concept drift. I like this one. This occurs when the underlying relationship between our target variable, will someone churn or not churn, or accept my offer or not, changes from the difference of the underlying, right? So all of those attributes, those nice attributes that I built up, that nice model that I created, the concept, the interaction between those has started to diverge, right? Concept change. This is important because if this is part of the environment change, if I can, in effect, see a lot of times when this is occurring in my model, in my data. These are the things I can observe to make sure that, guess what? Hey, this is something to make sure that I'm watching it, and now things are moving. My business is moving. Label drift. So label drift is ground truth. Yesterday, everybody above a FICO score 720 all accepted us. Now that number has gone down to 690, or it went up to 750. It's a different, and we'll talk about prediction drift in one moment, but these are two very separate things. They seem in many ways the same. Hey, my prediction is saying this, it's different. Why is label different? Label drift different. It means I'm looking at the ground truth. I'm looking at actually what happened. So this is after the fact. This is not before the fact of this model and the interaction with it. So for me, this is one of the more interesting aspects. This change can signify change in the environment in which you're working. So I was talking to Maddie a little bit earlier. What happens if AIG decided to get out of a completely business line, right? Shouldn't that mean more people come over from Tall and start to do business with them? This would be evident in a ground truth change or a label drift. Prediction drift. So prediction drift is much in the same way as label drift. But prediction drift is saying the predictions I were making yesterday or I was making a month ago are no longer similar to the ones I am now. Could be this through the door population, could be a data component, could be a business component. But ultimately what this drift is saying is I was predicting 60% of the people that were coming through would accept our offer and roll on. And now it's 20%, or now it's 70% based upon my predictions. Something has changed. And that is a big key for MLOps. I'm always looking for the change. And is that change acceptable to me? Or do I need to do something? Because ultimately, MLOps is all about, do I do something? Do I retrain my model? Do I go back to my SME team and say, hey, is there something different in the business environment that I'm not aware of, right? That's your job. I used to speak to, or I spoke to a consultant or a director of consultancy at Capgemini. He talked about it as a cockpit, right? When you're in MLOps, you're in a cockpit. All of these instruments are going on. You see all of this stuff that's happening. The question is, do I interact? Do I change it? Do I need to move in order to make this happen, right? Performance drift. So for all of us, that's my RMSC, my AUC, my recall, my precision, all of the good performance metrics that, calibration loss, all of the performance metrics that I might be observing today, did they change suddenly, right? And again, this is different. That's the fun part about all of this. Think about this. If you were just looking at a set of gauges, right? This is a lot of gauges to look at. There's a reason this is really tough, really expensive, and you should be very cognizant about what you're going up against when you start to take this on. So this is also why my data scientists don't like to do this as much, because there's a lot of work. It's not very fun, or at least it's not fun to them. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then business. Business is always changing. Everything that we're talking about here is internal to your organization. So anybody know Michael Porter? So he's a Harvard business professor. He came with the concept of Porter's 5 forces. If you ever, competitive advantage, if you've ever heard that term, that's Michael Porter, right? Well, one of the things he talks about are what Porter's 5 forces are in effect all of what can impact your organization. So threat of substitutes, threat of competition, changes in suppliers, customers, etc. All of those forces are working on your business, and this is part of business drift. These forces you cannot see. You can't necessarily gauge whether or not an organization is running a significant campaign against your company. But you'll see it potentially in the drift in one of these other drifts. So let's wrap all of this up. MLOps, as I've seen, creates significant returns. You get this right, you basically have a you can start printing money. Because it's not just that I built this model is now working throughout the entire process. First thing this does is it lowers the production costs at scale. So if you remember, I showed you that graph of cost versus revenue. Your ability to make money with this is all based upon your ability to drive the cost down. If you can drive every incremental model's cost lower, you will always be making money. We have a customer in the United States that was acquired a couple of years ago. They have 3,000 models in production that they're using. They have one built for every one of their, 13,000, excuse me. They have 3 models for every one of their customers that they've built for them. And they retrain it once a month. That is one of their competitive advantages when interacting with their customers. But their ability to do that is based upon their ability to knock the cost down to nothing. Second, and as Alistair and others have been saying, this sucks. It's not fun for a data scientist. You know what, the after compensation, the number one reason a data scientist will leave their organization are production-related issues. Either A, they can't get things into production, or B, they're having to manage it themselves. Happy data scientists have their own DevOps team that is dealing, or their own MLOps team that is working with this. They do one crank of the handle, make sure it works, hand it off, and they go do something else. Am I wrong?
My research shows that 60 to 80% of all models never get into production. Literally, basically, just can't get through that. And
Yeah.
The different processes have to go on.
Yep, and that's actually interesting. So I've heard that one too, and I've heard it multiple times. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, is every model you ever created going to go into production? Probably not, no. This is part of the process and part of why MLOps is so darn important. MLOps, machine learning and data science is an iterative process. If you do not fail in your iteration, something is wrong. So I do accept the fact that a large portion of models don't get to production for these exact reasons, but it's more like 30 to 40%, I think, get held up because of the production. The others are, hey, we tried it, didn't work, we move on. Right? So
my point is lack of human in the loop.
Oh, absolutely.
Lack of the business to actually go back and to help data science to tweak models.
Yes.
I build tools where the business can do that.
Yes. Good for you. Introduce you to data. Yes.
So I've started a company because of this exact problem.
Yep.
People get these models, they don't go to production, they're just sitting on Hugging Face doing nothing.
Yep.
And so newest product, Devilish.ai, is we take all those models that people aren't running because they've just one-offed, they've put it there, they've done some tests, it doesn't work exactly like they want to, or maybe it's a single person who's now new to the game, they've created some model, it works really good for them, but they don't have a team to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
They haven't put it in production. So we've created a service that takes all those models and runs them instantly. You select a model, and then it'll load it up and run it within a second.
Well, we will definitely be talking later at that. But again, I think this comes to the point. This is tough stuff, and your data science, your machine learning, your AI engineers is a very expensive talent. They don't necessarily want to run it. Happy DSML teams have MLOps capabilities built in within it. Faster model iteration. One of the things we were talking about, if you have MLOps in place, you're talking about a 30% increase in process efficiency. But according to McKinsey, if you assume McKinsey is actually, if you like to get your notes from there, I've seen stuff that's fairly similar as well. But there's definitely an interaction between how fast you can get models to production and your ability to generate revenue from those models themselves. And then your governance, it's better. You're less likely to be out of control. Any internal audit or external auditors here? Any of my auditor friends? No, none in the room. So I use this term out of control very specifically. So if you talk to an internal audit team or you talk to an external auditor like a KPMG, this is the worst thing you can be. So out of control means that you have no ability to understand what that process looks like. If you do not understand the process, guess what? Bad things happen. And in fact, there are things you don't know. And this is what keeps risk, operational risk committees up at night. MLOps ensures that you have a process in place so it's less likely to create poor or biased or errored models. Key takeaway, all of this MLOps, very expensive, very tedious. You have to get the right kind of people working on it, but it creates a discipline within your organization that will definitely help you build models going forward. With that, that's the end of my presentation. I will make a quick note for my organization, Dataiku, that was just announced as a 3-time leader for the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Feel free to talk to us about that or anything else. But I do appreciate everybody's time tonight. Thanks for listening to me blather on about a subject I really enjoy. Thanks for the feedback. We got shirts. We need to move some shirts.
Small sizes, so I give priority to the ladies.
But thank you all so much.
Are you willing to answer questions?
Absolutely.
So, some ground rules for tonight and going forward for question time. There isn't a whole lot of time left, and we do want to have additional informal networking time after the sit-down session. And it is in that time that I hope, Grant, you agree.
I'll stick around.
You can approach Grant and ask questions. And in that spirit, I ask you, first of all, if you have multiple questions, you only get to ask one here. If you have more questions, please ask Grant afterwards. So Grant, and I would ask Grant, if someone asks multiple questions, cut them off, please.
Cut him off, yeah.
No 3-part questions either.
The other thing is, please ask questions. If your question involves more than 2 sentences before your question, please save that for question time as well. And Grant, once again, if someone is doing their own version of a TED Talk, please ask them to do that.
No worries.
At the end. So in the spirit of that, please ask brief and to the point questions. Off we go.
You knew it, dude. You knew it. Here we go. One sentence. Just philosophical challenge. If the economists don't want to change the world, what's the point of having economists?
Right. The economists are there to try to understand. So for me, when I speak, because I have a very good friend who has a PhD in economics from University of Kentucky in the United States. The idea and the concept for economists is trying to understand the environment itself in which we live. That is not necessarily how are we trying to shape and change that environment itself. Doesn't mean every economist works that way, but for the most part, when we're building a model, you can't influence the entirety of the environment in which you build that model in an economic standpoint. So if I'm building a model of the entire Australian environment or the entire Australian economy, I might decide and understand how that works, but I don't necessarily, I can't impact that. When we're talking about something like a model such as a churn model, or we're talking about in the case of does someone have a disease or not, we're looking at type 1 or type 2 errors. There is a definite, we are trying to change what's happening. So it's an observer effect in that sense.
Yep. So.
Thank you for your talk. So I don't fully understand what you're selling. Are you selling a software package? Is it a process? Is it a template? Is it an advisory? consulting? What are you actually selling?
I try not to say so Dataiku as a quick, we are a machine learning and AI software platform for organizations. If you're interested, Lolo is actually looking at us right now. But for us we are trying to get those folks like our data scientists, our business analysts, all working together in one environment, whether just trying to build a data set or they're trying to build a machine learning model, all doing it together.
That's a management system.
It's a management system. Fair point. Yes. Question. Oh, yep, Bill.
Yeah, so trying to get everything into one environment, does that include large language models where the MLOps process is a little bit different?
That's a good question. So generative AI rears its head. Well, there's a new concept that's popped up called LLMOps, large language model ops. A lot of similarity between MLOps themselves, but one of the key aspects is a lot of the data drift associated with an LLM model is very specific to large language models. So how are you impacting the model itself and how it generates? That is not necessarily things that we deal with from a MLOps capabilities. I fully expect in the next 3 years, when we say MLOps, it'll be inclusive of large language model ops as well. But that's a great question. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. So when an organization is just getting sort of everything's on hard mode, they don't have any of the MLOps in place, and it's it's clear that you're burning money. You need to apply this. When you've been doing that for a bit, it's how do you have you seen any organizations who have got a good framework for how much to automate things? How far along the self-driving kind of spectrum? Because at a certain point, you're actually wasting money turning the crank on the MLOps investment.
Again, I think it's when you start getting into, when you start getting past about 5 models in production, the amount of work you're doing to get those models. If you get up to 5 models and it's taking you 6 months to get that next model into production, you're past the point where you're ready to start bringing a lot of MLOps in place, because MLOps will, in effect, lower the amount of time it takes to do that iteration.
Yeah.
So.
I meant the other end. How do you know when you're going too far?
Oh, you're going too far into.
Where do you invest in the automation? Because there's so much you can do. Should you do full auto retraining?
No, I would say if you're going to invest your time, invest it in monitoring first. Full model retrains are not. That's further down the road in most organizations, unless your data is moving and your drift, the delta in your drift is such that you need to be doing a model every day. Don't. But I think the key is really, if you're going to invest your time, first it's in model readiness, making sure that we've got the model that's going into production is the same one it is, and then monitoring behind it. Then the retraining aspect starts kind of last. Yeah, go ahead.
It's all new and exciting now. One day you'll have 30,000 models all on different platforms, different versions of software, different levels of use.
It'll be boring. That would be great.
So what is the optimum number of models to have?
It's a great question. Honestly, it could be, if everything was efficient in your ability to make it work, it could be infinite, right? So if everybody, I could foresee the day that we all have, if anybody watched Her, it's same concept. We all have models at that point, and there's some organization that's running them. That's 300 million if we're talking about the United States, 25 million, here. So again, I don't think the number of models, there is a cap associated with it. It's more of, can you, in the case of this organization I was talking about earlier, they have 13,000 models in production. If they didn't have the sort of ability and efficiency and retraining and all of it, automated to the hilt, there'd be no way for them to do that. So I think it really comes back to your ability to get things automated. Yep, it's a great question. Yep.
Yeah. How do you gain confidence in 3,000 models? So I can imagine doing it just 5 or 10.
Yep.
But are you, in your business at least, automating the checks?
Yeah.
of all the metrics.
But again, I think this comes back to the organization itself. If I have 3,000 models that are just doing, fairly mundane things and it doesn't impact anything, if one's out of, in much the same way, if a Docker file in a Kubernetes cluster breaks, destroy it, rebuild it, and it doesn't matter. The question becomes when we start talking about models like over here and a healthcare setting, that becomes a lot more important. So it's not necessarily the 3,000 models, it's what are they doing? What is the risk associated with it? What's the impact? If the Department of Home Affairs goes down and we're not able to process people coming into Australia, guess what? That's a hell of a lot more important than if, we're able to serve up a coupon. Yes. Just hold on. Here's get the mic.
Just sort of provide. Could you just provide a bit of color on what actually the boundary of a model is?
Yeah.
When you say got 13,000 models.
Yes.
What exactly is the?
So it's a good question. So when we're talking about MLOps, and this is back in the definition, machine learning models. So when I talk about models, I'm typically talking about machine learning models. Those TensorFlow models, they could be scikit-learn models, they could be things built in models built in R. That's typically what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a model today. Now, a model in a broader sense could be a rule-based model. So for example, fraud detection. If I receive a transaction over $10,000, I need to flag that so that someone can watch it. So that's where I kind of draw the line, because rule-based systems have a difference, very similar, but not necessarily the exact same as machine learning models. But a lot of, again, they're not all the same, but there's a lot of rhyming that goes on.
I guess where I was.
Yep.
I'm really trying to follow up. I was just trying to understand.
Yep.
If you have a TensorFlow model, whatever that is, and it applies to 5 different things, different parameters, whatever, are they the different models, or is it you've got a TensorFlow model of the same thing and
that becomes a little bit more of a, if you're using the same model but it applies to different things, are those different models? That becomes a little bit more of a nuanced discussion, but there's no direct answer on that.
So just want to know how MLOps ensure the government better, how exactly it was done.
How does
something going wrong, like you have to prove to quant, there's no error or bias for machine learning, how you do that.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes on to MLOps, and it's mostly about process, right? So you need 3 things: people, process, and technology. Technology is the easy one. Process tends to be the most important one. So when we're talking about MLOps, we're talking about process. So we're creating a set of processes to get into production. The question becomes, what is part of that process? We talked about it a little bit earlier. Is it ensuring that you're not biased? Is that important? That can go into the MLOps. It doesn't necessarily, every organization may have a different set of concerns, and that can fold into MLOps. There are broad strokes, so data, code, and the environment that I need, but the different elements that I might use are completely dependent upon the organization. So in other words, it depends. So yes, question.
You've spoken a lot about how to anticipate something scaling and that the future would contain more models than fewer. How would you advise a business to go about eliminating waste, knowing that this is also extremely expensive and that most of them are actually garbage that won't do anything?
Yep. So it's a good question. Same way we've done everything inside of IT organizations and analytics. Is this report getting run? Is this data set being used? Is this model actually being called? If it's not, kill it, right? Because the incremental cost associated with each new model is more and more expensive. So in this case, this is why I say monitoring is the second aspect to look at. because if you're monitoring, you're actually seeing how many times is somebody calling this. Because if nobody's calling the model, this goes back to the point. It's a dead model. Time to go. Time to get rid of it.
Last question.
Yeah,
we have a hand.
AutoML is not really used in most data science because Python's are incredibly slow.
Yeah.
AutoML is not really used because data scientists refuse to use it, and Python's incredibly slow with AutoML. Is that something you guys are doing, and is that something the business should be moving to?
So AutoML is an interesting one, and that I don't see most hardcore data scientists saying they want to use AutoML. I'm going to take you back 25 years ago. I was sitting across from someone where I was trying to become an intern for web development. And I had shown them, I had built some stuff in front page, and he's like, well, then he popped open Notepad and he's like, this is where I hand coded all my HTML. And it's like, why did you do that? He's like, that because I have more control. Well, over time, in effect, what happens? The people that were doing the development, the people that needed to create the content, were never interested in the HTML in the first place. So I think there is absolutely a valid reasons to use AutoML. Prototyping being one, the ability to move across multiple algorithms with sets of hyperparameters very quickly. But ultimately, in 5 years, the data scientists, you're going to get bored. Data science is going to be bored. It will continue to progress and move on. It will become more and more mundane, and AutoML will get better and better. So again, I don't think it's a question of today. Could I take out a data scientist and have them just do, give AutoML to somebody and make it work? No. I can make it. It makes it look pretty easy. But in 5 to 7 years from now, I may look at it across from somebody that's, oh, you're hand coding that? Why?
It takes 3 to 6 months to find the features.
Yeah.
And then,
but that's the whole point. AutoML is different from feature generation.
I do that as well. I do that.
Yeah. But we'll have a very spirited discussion about that. But yes, but I absolutely understand what you're saying.
Would you please all join me in thanking Grant for a very valuable presentation?
Appreciate that. And I'll stay up here if you have questions. Feel free.
Now we have our traditional announcements period, when those of you with relevant announcements, which are particularly of interest, anybody with jobs going. So if anybody has any available positions, including Grant, please come and let us know. Otherwise, any announcements of any other kind, you're very welcome. Are there any more T-shirts to give away?
T-shirts.
My only announcement is that there's still pizza. Not a lot of it, but I do hope you hang around for a bit and use the opportunity to ask Grant more questions and get to know each other as well. Last call for announcements.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody's interested in using ML for trading, come and talk to me.
If anybody wants to try any Llama, Solar, or I'm not sure about the other ones, of either 8 billion parameter, 10 billion, or 70 billion parameter models, we are inferencing all of them at very low cost at our beverless.ai.
Anybody else? Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you hang around for a bit.